federal government has considered a new fuel price regime as PPPRA recommended an upward review of the retail pump price of petrol from the previous 121 naira to between 140 naira and 143 naira. And some notable Nigerians like Mr. Olisa Agbakoba, Femi Falana, Patu Tomi, Obi Ezekwesili coming up with a new political movement with the agenda to save Nigeria. Hello everyone and welcome to the program. This is Politics Today live on Channels Television. I'm Sean Kimbaloye in Lagos. It's the midweek edition of the program. So I'm going to be helping you out to make sense of some of the major political stories in this 1 hour ride. So let's begin. You remember the drama which played out yesterday at a Senate committee sitting when Mr. Festus Keyamo, the Minister of State for Labor, was with them after the Tuesday face-off between the National Assembly and the Minister of Labor. The National Assembly says the implementation of the 774,000 public works program be put on hold until the modalities for executing the program are explained to the federal legislature. In a joint statement from the Senate and House of Representatives, National Assembly is mandating its committees on labor to immediately invite the Minister of Labor and other relevant officials of the ministry to brief members on the modality for the implementation of the Public Works Program. Briefing journalists at the National Assembly Senate spokesperson, Mr. Senator Ajibola Bashiru, says the legislature was involved in the conceptualization of the Public Works Program. Well, the minister there had said yesterday that this, the Senate committee or the Senate, the National Assembly, has power of oversight, but they don't have the power to stop him from going ahead. We'll see how this pans out anyway, constitutionally, where these two arms of government belong. The acting chairman of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, Mr. Ibrahim Magu, has restated the commission's resolve to recover all stolen funds from corrupt persons. Mr. Magu, who spoke at a meeting with in Abuja, highlights how billions of naira was recovered by the commission. He, however, advised the nation's youths to channel their energies into ventures that will create jobs and income for them instead of engaging in fraud.
We are at the level of a moving train. Yes. You know, a moving train. We don't have apology to any looter. We just hit them. I'm telling you, we hit them. And I want you to monitor what we are doing. Yes. So that it's not a one-way situation. You have the right to check the excesses that you record here. Yes. Find a way to tell me that something is going wrong. I will take correction. If you don't do that, you are not, I mean, you are already part of the fight against corruption. So you have a duty, responsibility to look at the right thing we are doing and also the wrong thing we are doing. If we are doing wrong, tell us. Because if you don't tell us, you are also responsible. Yes. Yes. You are now part and parcel of the fight against corruption. Please. So I want to urge you to not only release public information for us to fight corruption, also to monitor our activities, make sure we do the right thing, because you are part of it. If we do wrong, you also carry the blame. So correct us if we are doing wrong, and we will try as much as possible not to do the wrong thing.
Thank you so much, everyone. One of the conversations we'll be having tonight is about the so-called, the new political movement idea by some notable Nigerians. We'll be hearing from one of the facilitators what is behind this idea. And we've seen and heard from some of these Nigerians before. But let's take a look at some of the stories that we have for you on our political roundup. And we'll come back to talk more.
President Muhammadu Buhari has forwarded to the Senate the names of 41 non-career ambassadors designate for confirmation. The upper chamber also received a request for the confirmation of Suleiman Sani as career ambassador designate for the Federal Capital Territory. The president's requests are contained in a letter read on the floor by the Senate President Ahmed Lawan during Wednesday's plenary session. If the price hike by cable TV service provider MultiChoice is not reversed within 1 month, the National Broadcasting Commission will be sanctioned. That's according to the House of Representatives Committee on the implementation of pay-as-you-go tariff plan by cable TV service providers. Chairman of the committee, Onyime Idem, says this is the final resolution of the committee.
I have directed the Commissioner of Police.
Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed has set up a panel of investigation to unravel the real cause of farmers-herders' land dispute, which claimed 9 lives Tuesday in Malunje, Zadawa village area of Misau local government area. Also, caretaker committee chairman of Misau local government area, Alhaji Mohammed Gwaram, has been suspended alongside his deputy and secretary. The local government authorities have been alleged to have triggered the dispute during an attempt to allocate lands for use in the area. The Ogun State Governor Dakwa Abiodun has challenged the state public service to adequately rise up to the socio-economic challenges occasioned by the current coronavirus pandemic by redoubling effort towards the state economic recovery. He made the call in Abeokuta, the state capital, while swearing in the 17th and 5th state newly appointed head of service, a commissioner for transport, and 2 special advisors.
Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get talking now. Don't forget, we're going to get a sense of what the plans of the federal government in jacking up the price of fuel, what it means for you as an average Nigerian. We get a sense of what that means for you. And also, one of our stories tonight is a plan of some notable Nigerians, Mr. Femi Falana, Mr. Agbakoba, Mr. Patu told me, Professor Patu told me, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, coming together to form another political front with the aim of saving Nigeria. Is that the answer for Nigeria political journey? We'll find out what the plan of those men and women are for Nigeria. But first, let's look at the plan of the federal government and the policies on the issues of reopening schools and how the federal government is tackling these issues of COVID-19. Some of the teachers and some associations are saying it is not necessary to open schools. But how long will these schools stay open? Well, if you have your children at home, are they getting the best of education amidst this COVID-19 pandemic? Let's get talking. But we understand that on Monday, the federal government came out with the plan on moving forward, extending the phase 2 of the easing of the lockdown by 4 weeks. We have joining us to give us insight into this the Minister of State for Education, Mr. Emeka Nwajuba. He joins us from Abuja. So thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for coming on tonight. So let Nigerians know clearly, Honorable Minister, what the plan really is, which part of the schools are opening, when will the schools fully open, and perhaps give us a sense of the safety measures that your ministry and the federal government has put in place.
And good evening, viewers, fellow Nigerians. I would like to begin by explaining that, in truth, what was announced on Monday is not really a resumption of school. We had asked that schools around the country please allow students to go home and operate from home. No schooling had been taking place, nothing of the sort. But the schools themselves, with their employees, some of them are government officers. But what we announced on Monday wasn't a school reopening. What we did was that we presented to the PTF and, by extension, the federal government of Nigeria, the plans by examination bodies to hold their exams. The exams are critical for how children progress. And we examined it, and we felt that it is important to allow those examinations to take place, but that ahead of them taking place, because we know that our schools are going to be used as venue for all of this, that it is important that those children who have not had the opportunity to revise their syllable or go through the curriculum that have been set out for them should have an opportunity to go through all of that and have a revision class before the exams. If there are people who are comfortable, most people who can afford it already are saying that they want to be at home and go to the exams from home. That is terrific. We had set out our rules over this time to show people how to get online and so on, but we understand the limitations of, well, I say the average Nigerian, because most of the people who can afford laptops and the devices, and you saw in Lagos today, distributing ordinary radios has been very hectic. And we know that our children, or not all of them, have the same access. And if there are people who do have this access and who feel confident that their children are ready for the exams, we don't have, nobody's compelling anybody to actually go to any school. What we have done is make the facilities of our schools available. You all know that education is on the concurrent legislative list, and we've asked that state governments that own these schools, this is what we plan. We think each school should have places to wash your hands, check check the temperature of the children constantly, have sanitizers in place. Private schools should be able to provide theirs, and state government should be able to provide theirs. The federal government owns I think just about 104 unity colleges, and already the PTAs and the SBMs will meet as to how those they want to open and those they don't want to open. So it's really not a compulsion. We're just making the facilities available for the purposes of taking the exams, for those who want to take the exams, because there are also people who may not actually want to take the exams, but it would not be a responsible act by government to then say, because there are some people who may not want, that we should not make available the facilities for those who may want. Because life is a continuous journey of choices, and children have been at home. Those of them who are able to have access to the internet and be able to be learning, or are using any of the devices to access what we've provided and have been learning, we congratulate them. We think they should do that more. We've appealed to parents to please continue to help. But my job is at the Ministry of Ministry of Education is to oversee what is going on in Nigeria generally and all over the country. A country of 36 states with and a federal capital territory with nearly 200 million people, with nearly 30 million of us in schools. We know for a fact that less than 10%, 20% of our actual population have access to this. We have 1.56 million children registered for WAEC this year, and we know that internet penetration amongst this group still less than 300,000 students have access to the internet. So it will be height of injustice not to make available facilities for others to learn.
Honorable Minister,
but then there's no compulsion.
Okay, great. Before we go into the
classes, to simply work in and take their exams, that's all.
All right, before we go into the nitty-gritty of the plans on those who want to go for examination to go back, because you're clarifying these issues now, and people are knowing that it is not compulsory to go back to school. But then let's first and foremost get the view, or your view, on the projection. Do you have a projection on a possible date of full school resumption?
Full school resumption would be a matter of detail with the data we have. The children we're inviting into schools, or the ones at the moment, our school students are basically from 5 years to about 19. Is the lowest heat age bracket with the COVID, but we're not taking any chances with them. We have to wait and look at what the data shows before we can announce a proper resumption of school. truly speaking, for all the classes, we don't mind all the suggestions that we've received from stakeholders in the educational ecosystem, that you can actually graduate them to the next level without necessarily, you can use a couple of tools of assessment, continuous assessment provisions, work they've done before. We can use all of that in an attempt to move them to the next rung of the ladder. But that is not the same thing for an examination class. An exiting class. The exiting classes, we are provided them with a certification to go to the next level. That's what this is about. We will take on the idea of reopening schools as we know it at a later date, but that is speaking only to the science and the data, because we've been having constant communication with all the National Center for Disease Control, the Ministry of Health. We are constantly on top of the data on this matter. And we're looking at these children, for instance, the ones coming to take exams are those aged between 10 and 19. So between that, is this 9-year bracket, we've seen the lowest in infection rates. We know that children at the moment, they're at home, they mingle with their own parents or with friends, or with those who go to the market and come back, or those who go to the mosque or churches and come back. They do all kinds of activities. Some of them, those that are well off, can afford to keep their children watching TV, but some are using their children as hawkers. We're losing people who we're trying to bring back to school. And if we do not do anything about this, we will just lose all the children altogether, and you'll probably be not able to return them to school eventually. But all of that is within our contemplation. But that is not to say we're going to then put the children all at once in school at risk. The idea behind having a few, which constitute maybe less than 20% of the school population at any time, to be around at this time for these exams, is such that you can afford to use all the classes to just have a few. So you can achieve social distancing. You can achieve using the limited facilities available in the school to control.
So if I may butt in quickly,
your manpower to be able to.
So, Honorable Minister, if I may butt in quickly again, just in about 1 minute or less before we go on our first break on the program, how do you speak to teachers who say they are afraid, because it does look like the plans you are making is only for students? What about the teachers that will teach them? What do you say to those teachers who say that they do not want to die and they are not ready to go back to school until they see concrete plans for them?
I will say that the affairs are actually correct. It is important that they look at what we are also discussing with their schools, because we've also said all the facilities that are available in the schools must be available to the teachers. The washing of hands, thermometers, sanitizers, what kind of tests that they require, access to our emergency lines, whatever they require. Today in Nigeria, it is very difficult to say anybody moving out without masks. So the Federal Ministry of Education is not about to embark on a journey of sewing masks for everybody, because we already know that everybody has been asked over these past 6-7 weeks to wear masks and be able to use them. So we're not going to be saying because we want teachers back, we need to make separate masks for them. We want them to take the same cautions that everybody has. However, what we're trying to do is we want to have that kind of the rapprochement with them, such that anything that they need to make this happen in their particular schools, the federal government and the state governments and owners of schools will be available to make that. You make those kind of rapprochement with them. We are
all right,
to
Honorable Minister, let's
teachers.
Yeah. Let's take our first break. We need to pay some bills. And when we come back, we'll get your closing thoughts on the concrete plans that you are making, considering some other climes and how they face the resumption of pupils back in school. What are the plans of the federal government in not allowing the students to stay perpetually at home idle? We'll take a break, and when we come back, up next, we're going to talk more with the minister, and then we'll be asking those who are behind the new political movement what they mean for Nigeria. Of course, the issue of the new fuel price regime. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get back to our conversation with the Honorable Minister for State for Education, Honorable Emeka Nwajuba. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for your time tonight and getting to clarify this, especially for a lot of Nigerians, some of our children who are at home perpetually. A big question here is what we have seen in other climes. For example, there is a phased resumption of schools in some other climes where you have maybe primary 1 to 3 at a certain hour, maybe the first 4 or 5 hours of the day, primary 4 to 6, in another 3 or 4 hours of the day, thereby decreasing the number of contact and spacing them out. Is the government thinking in that regard? Because the question is, how long can you keep these children out of school?
Well, my brother Shem and rest of Nigeria, this is exactly what we're trying to do with trying to get the exit classes out of the way. We're not just trying to get them out of the way. We're trying to manage the number that is available so that we can do all of what you've just said. We can rotate them. We can have mixed classes. We can have different sort of class sizes. We can have different cadres of classes coming in at different times of the day. We're working on all of those scenarios. But at the root of that is, first of all, getting the exit classes out. Once we're able to deal with those who we must manage uniformly, because the exams brings all of them together. So we must manage them uniformly. There's no way to say to those who are going to take WAEC, don't come or at different times. You're going to have a problem with that. So we want to use all of our facilities now to just manage this number that are exiting. Once we're done with them, we can then rearrange classes as they suit local needs. Because you see, even this year's WAEC, we're working on even taking some of them outside the classroom, maybe in the fields where the permits. There are so many things we've worked on, but we will need to take them one at a time. Everything that you've talked about, morning classes to afternoon classes, different class sizes for different streams, reduction in how many hours each teacher takes, all of that are in the works. But at the root of all of them is being able to manage this transition properly.
But, Honorable Minister, when will that happen? The phased resumption that you just explained, when will that happen? How soon will this happen?
I am not going to immediately give you a date because the data from the National Center for Disease Control will inform that. It is not, right now, Nigeria's numbers are not peaking yet. We want to be able to see where the peak are and examine the numbers and how it relates to all our teachers, how it will relate to all the various local governments. Right now, we are going for almost precision lockdowns in some 18 to 20 local governments where this is most prevalent and where the community transmission is taking place a whole lot. And many of them are in the urban centers. And we're looking at what state governors want to do as well, because you see, Nigeria and education being on the concurrent list, and we talking with the subnationals, they have a lot of powers over their own schools and their institutions. The country is large with 13,000 primary schools. We're not looking at primary schools immediately because only those who are going to be taking their common entrance exams will be invited only for one Saturday to take the common entrance and return home. Those don't need revision class anywhere in any school or in any primary school. We're not opening any of the primary schools at all. The secondary schools where the Becker exams and NAPTEB, NECO, and WAEC exams are going to be taking place are the only ones that are allowed to even get into this revision class requirement. If they think their children are all well to do and they cannot and they can afford to go there and take the exams and come out in shining, well, thank God. But if those who have the ability to organize these classes and make sure that they are running a stream and their curriculums are covered and the syllables are met, then we would avail them all our facilities with the guidance that we have provided and asking all the owners of schools to please provide.
Yeah. So let's conclude this conversation, and it's going to be our final question tonight is going to be on the issues of infrastructure. When COVID-19 came, it exposed the nation, it exposed Nigeria in our vulnerable areas. For example, our healthcare facilities, our healthcare system, we know it's in a deplorable situation. And perhaps the education sector is far as bad as the healthcare system in Nigeria. There are no classrooms in some schools. There are no writing materials in some schools. In some tertiary institutions, there are no seating. There are no classrooms for students to sit. Students are overpopulated than the facilities that are provided. So in the healthcare system, governments across the state and the federal government are building isolation centers. So we've seen this exposure also in the education system. Has there been any intentional move in fixing this dilapidated and deplorable state of our education sector?
Well, Cheryl, like all Nigerians will also realize, the problem of education as in health, all the social sectors, actually stems from the fact that they are on the concurrent list. So the federal government can't possibly be doing everything everywhere at the same time. State governors are pulling their weight as all the states are not equal, really, in terms of infrastructure and their needs. And therefore, we had, over time, when I was in the House of Reps in the 1990s, we came up with this bill on UBEC. And that was how UBEC became law, trying to assist state governors to establish this infrastructure. That has gone a long way in helping everybody come to some sort of level, but that's not enough. Around the country, infrastructure are owned by private individuals or private businesses. They are also owned by federal government, and then they are also, majority are owned by state governments. And the state of infrastructure is really appalling in some areas. Many public-spirited individuals have also tried to help. You've heard about the Dangote Foundation. You've heard of the Oando Foundation. We have our own foundation, which I run with a few young men, the Repair Nigeria Foundation, that's also repairing schools around the country. So around the country, people are making a lot of effort. Old boys, old girls, associations, everybody is calling me and they're helping. We thank everybody. But to answer you really is that government doesn't have that kind of resources now, because one of the things that also has come with COVID is that the Nigeria's economy was badly eroded. We owe a lot of money around the world trying to build the major infrastructures that are here, and then most of our income goes to servicing those debts. For over 20 years now, Nigeria has had debts that were borrowed to do a lot of things. So as the little money you earn goes into service and all of that. However, with the interface of the little state governors are able to do, the federal government is doing with international organizations, you say the UNESCO's, the World Bank, everybody's throwing their support around helping with infrastructure around the country. We're doing quite a bit. So that is a process that will continue. Like I told you, there are 135,000 such schools around Nigeria. So it takes a bit of time for all of that to happen. And no one person controls all of it.
All right, Honorable Minister.
We are pulling everybody together. At the SUBEB levels, we're asking everybody to get on the same wavelength with us. Some local governments are far flung. Some governors are doing some terrific work. Look at Yobe State, look at Borno State, Zulum, some fantastic work in the last 1 year. A lot of people are working. In Imo State, I see what the new governor there is trying to project, looking at the new systems. Some governors actually mismanaged the opportunities over time, and actually in some countries ought to be tried. I mean, look at the mess that was in Imo State for 8 years. But if you look at the opportunities others have had, they've tried to bring this thing to steam. We'll continue along those lines to try to encourage them. The little resources, management of it, just the same thing you have in the health sector. We've not had the massive donations that the health sector has gotten from COVID or from everybody. Nobody has started the education sector emergency because it's not the same thing as the health emergency. So,
Honorable Minister, I guess it's a good place to drop it. And yeah, I must sincerely thank you for your intervention and the clarity that you have brought into some of the issues with some of the teachers and parents and students who are at a loss on what is really happening. I guess by this one, we'll have some clarity and looking forward for a more policy decision in the nearest future. Honorable Emeka Nwajuoba, Minister of State for Education, thank you indeed for your time tonight.
Very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. So let's move into yet another issue. Of course, a story that came in earlier this evening. A group called the National Consultative Front, NCF, comprising of Nigerians like former Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Gali Umaranababa, Dr. Olisa Agbakoba, Professor Patu Tomi, Mr. Femi Falana, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, Professor Jibo Ibrahim, have all come together in projecting a new political movement, which they say they want to help save Nigeria against the worrisome background of the continued slide of Nigeria into political anarchy and unabated bloodletting and death owing to the incompetence and failure of the present political leadership of the country in dealing with the national democratic question of Nigeria as a diverse, multi-ethnic, multi-religious, and multicultural entity. That is the agenda of these men and women, notable Nigerians indeed. So let's get a sense of what this means. One of the facilitators of this group, the NCF, is Professor Anthony Killer, a political scientist and a development expert, who joins me on the telephone now to give us a sense of what this means. Professor Killer, thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight. We've seen some of these groups come together pre-2015, pre-2019, trying to form a political movement. Is this the same kind of idea and agenda we saw in the past coming forth again?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Sheung. I think a couple of things need to be said. The emphasis should be on why are they coming together, not the outcome. There's a saying that says that, as long as you have lice in the hair, there'll be blood on your fingernails. The problem remains. We are in a situation in the country where you have disgruntled nationalities, disaffected professionals, and disconnected citizens. Some people might be happy, I'm sure. There's some people who are delighted the way Nigeria is going, but I think there's a lot of people who are not. The problem we have in front of us goes beyond partisan politics. It's not a matter of APC, PDP, or PPP, TTT. And as you can see, from the chronicles of every day, these people move from one side to the other. There is a system problem. We need to review the way we live together. We need to review the basic norms. It's not a matter of one man or one party anymore. We need to reevaluate and rediscover what we mean by democracy and liberty. Now, those of us who do not believe that the right way is to give up. Those of us who do not believe that the only solution to power problem is buying generator, or the only solution to bad road is to buy SUVs, or the only solution to security is to take private guard. Things that, just as our counterparts do in the rest of the world, people
Professor,
with us under us.
Yeah, the big question when you look at the list of people that are involved here are not aliens and Nigerians. Some of them have held offices. Some of them are people who have superintended over Nigeria in some of the critical areas that you have raised.
Yes.
In terms of public perception and public acceptance of this platform, what comes to the mind of the NCF? Because you said you're forming a new political front. But the question some people will ask is, what is it not the same of the same?
Well, if those people ask it, the answer to them is not who is there, it's why are they there. If Sheung or King Balon decide to come tomorrow to come and lead it, I will yield the floor for him. The important reason is why are they coming together, not who is there. You see, that is a crucial thing we as a people need to be asking ourselves. Not who, not where are we going, It is why are we together? How are we together? We need to depenalize our situation and look for ideas and objectives. If the good, the bad, and ugly come together to discuss quality things, it's a good thing. And they shall be held to account by what they propose to do. And it is not true. Those people who you have mentioned, those are highly qualified professionals with big history. But I don't want to defend individuals.
I agree with you, Prof, at some point. But again, the question is that if you also look at some of the people on the list are people who have contested for office in not so far future parts of Nigeria, and it does look like it is the amalgamation of people who are not in office presently or who are not beneficiary of present political formation who thinks that they want to form another political front.
Oh, you mean like they are like President Buhari 5 or 6 years ago? Is that what you're saying? Yes.
It does look like that, isn't it?
It is people who are not in office that try to improve what is going on. If you're trying to imply that they're there because they're out of power, maybe. It is not the goodness of politicians that saves our political institutions. It is their ideas. Politicians go there for God knows what reason.
For those who are out of office,
people need to then
Professor, apologies, please. It's not a crime for anybody to aspire politically, but the question is that what is the new thing they will be bringing to the table, or this group will be bringing to the table, and how does Nigerians, or how do Nigerians receive them? A lot of people who have thought that we've seen over and over again these faces, and they're coming with new ideas, supposedly. So, from the minds of an average Nigerian, what exactly is new? That's a big question, isn't it, Prof?
Yes, and the simple answer to your big question is, what is new is a new approach to things. Some of these approaches are not so new. The fact is they've not been implemented. So what is new is a request for people to review the Nigerian system. I repeat, nations that make up Nigeria are disgruntled. Professionals that make up Nigeria are disaffected. Normal citizens are disconnected. So the productive Nigerians need to come back and own this country. That is the new idea. We want to review the system.
Prof. Prof, quickly, will this group be forming a political party?
Yes. Sorry, can you say that again, Sheung?
I say, will your group be forming a political party at the end of the day?
Why not, and if not? They've not registered a political party. Let's not speculate.
No, I'm asking, is the end goal going to be forming a political party? Because if you're a political movement, the movement will be going nowhere if you're not seeking political office to change things, isn't it? That's how political science works.
There are two strands of thought. People are pushing for formation of political parties. Other people are saying, let us just push for ideas. And at some point, the results will come out. And when it comes out, I will guarantee that Sheung will be the first person to know in Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Professor Anthony Kila, facilitator of the NCF, the group that is birthing the new political movement. We see how that pans out with Professor Patu Tomi, Mr. Femi Falano, Dr. Obadiah Melafia, Gali Nababa, and the rest. Who doesn't want a new face of Nigeria in terms of development? All of us want that. But we'll take a breather. And when we come back, you will be going to buy fuel, but at a higher price. What does this mean to your pocket and the food on your table? We look at President Buhari's new fuel price regime and what the implications are. That's after the break, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone. So perhaps from today or tomorrow, petrol in Nigeria will sell for the least amount of 140 naira. And that is an increase from the initial rate of about 130 naira per liter. So the Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPRA, recommended an upward review of the retail pump price of petrol from 121 naira to between 140 naira and 143 naira. Don't forget that the pump price presently at 125 naira per litre in March was reviewed downwards in April to 123, and in May it was reviewed downwards to 108 naira, and the retail price was adjusted again to 121 naira per litre in June. So this is, of course, a great impact that COVID-19 is having across the world on the economy. Issues of export and importations. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. Let's get implication and some thoughts on what this means. I have joining me a former deputy governor of the central bank, Dr. Obadiah Melafia. Interestingly, Dr. Melafia is also on the list of the new political movement. It's good to see you again, Doc, and perhaps you want to touch on that quickly before we get into the issue and the politics of fair price.
Well, actually, Sharon, I'm here to speak on the economy, not on politics. So why don't you focus on the economy? I prefer to do that right now.
Interesting. That's good. So what are your immediate reaction to the new price regime?
Well, it's not altogether surprising, even though, to be honest with you, I think the change is a little bit too drastic. Because only the other day, the IMF and the World Bank have been warning us that we might be moving, unfortunately, towards a very major recession, given the long-term impact of the lockdown and the coronavirus pandemic in general. We took a gradual process, up to 108, 121, and 130, and 125. And I think that, in increasing, we should have gone back, steadily, that sort of thing. The increase is just too sharp. And coming at a time when, the fundamentals are really looking weak, maybe it's a little bit too drastic, I would say. Would have reduced it to, let's say, 130. But one major factor, obviously, that all our viewers know is that we are the sixth biggest producer in OPEC. And the irony is that we're also a major importer of refined petroleum. So as prices increase, so does the bill for the import of refined petroleum. Much as with the revenue benefits from the increase in global oil prices, it also impacts on us negatively in terms of the import bill for refined petroleum. So it's a paradoxical situation. And I would imagine that this adjustment is taking account of those realities.
But this is not any fault of the federal government, is it? Because are they left with any option because of the very frustrating nature of the economics and the politics of how oil price goes up on the global market? Is the federal government left with no option, Doc?
Well, I think they still have some options, obviously, because they could have adjusted it from 125 to 130, but they went drastically to 140, between 140 and 143. So it's like we're almost back to what it was at the beginning, which was about 145, So they had an option in terms of timing and in terms of also the actual price. But they have decided to do it this way. My concern is not with the adjustment itself, because one way or the other, in the due course of time, we would have had to adjust to the reality, the fact that we are a net importer of refined petroleum. And of course, someone has to pay for it. And the subsidies are virtually out. There were massive fraud, if you ask me, to be very honest with you, for a very long time. So I'm happy that, you know, we are outside the subsidies, but at the same time, government should, you know, have exercise some kind of restraint in terms of the kind of adjustments that are made. Given the reality of our situation, that the economy is at one of its lowest points, all the fundamental aggregates are looking very weak, and confidence is at a very low level. Added by, generally the geopolitical situation of the country, which is a very unhappy one, if you ask me the truth. Fractious, divisions within the party, there's an appearance of a lack of coherence in terms of focus and direction. And all these things have an impact on how, the economy performs. So these things we have to look into very carefully in order to reset the economy on the path of, growth and long-term sustainable development.
The petrol is a popular commodity with Nigerians. If you look at the number of people who have cars, who own cars in Nigeria, it may not be as much of a percentage, but if you look at how popular this product is with Nigerians, definitely we have some level of impact in terms of transportation and all of that. What comes to your mind as a major implications on the pocket of an average Nigerian, the impact of the new price regime?
Well, I don't know whether the word popular, petrol is a necessity. It's a fundamental necessity for the economy, for transportation, many of our homes suffer from serious, light problems, so diesel and the rest of them. All of these are, very critical inputs in terms of, the whole industrial machinery of the country. And to be honest, I welcomed the reduction of prices way back in March. I thought it was a very good thing. But don't forget also that during that period, the lockdown was taking place, and in fact, there was hardly any movement. So people were mostly staying at home anyway and didn't get to really use a lot of petrol. Now that, the thing is being eased, I think that we should have waited a little bit longer so that confidence will gradually be restored, and the great Nigerian economy can be back to work again. And let's be very careful, because in a situation of slowdown, the one thing you don't want to do is, unnecessarily raise the cost of inputs, and even taxation and the rest of it. This is not the time to do it. This is the time to nurture the golden egg, the golden chicken that lays the golden egg. So I think these are things we have to look at more carefully in order to get the economy back to work again, restore confidence, and propel long-term sustainable growth.
Dr. Obadiah Melafia, former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank, always a pleasure having you share your thoughts on some of these economic and national issues. Thank you indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me.
I appreciate it. Have a wonderful evening. Well, that's our show tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful evening.